Welcome to episode 2 of Blockchain Security with Rose Law Group. My name is Omar Abdallah. I'm a Web3 attorney at Rose Law Group, and with me again is Ouail Tayarth, who is a blockchain developer and smart contract auditor with us. Ouail, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So, Ouail, in episode 1 of this series, we talked about blockchain security and smart contract auditing sort of on a high level. And one of the things that we talked about was the immutability of smart contract code, that once you've written smart contracts and deployed them on the blockchain, that's sort of it, right? And so you can't go back and edit them. And so, which is why it's so important that you audit those smart contracts.
Absolutely.
And when you audit them, right, you're looking both for weaknesses in the code and also for human error. And so I wanted to talk to you today kind of about that distinction, the distinction between vulnerabilities and mistakes in smart contracts. So you think you could tell us, a little bit about what the difference is between a vulnerability and a mistake in smart contracts?
Absolutely. So the difference between mistakes and vulnerabilities is that a mistake happened or occurred inside a smart contract code based on the programming language that the smart contract was written in. And when we made the mistakes inside the smart contract, whatever the programming language, we open the door for vulnerability. So, and this vulnerability can be also a way for other hackers to exploit the smart contract. So I would say when a mistake is made in the code logic of the smart contract, it's very important to audit the smart contract before deploy it on the network and make sure that all the functionalities are functioning well and all users' funds are protected as it was planned on the documentation of the project.
Right. So I think I read in some articles recently, that there was a project, it was holding some user funds and the funds were drained, and the exploit was basically just based off of a mistake in the code where I guess the developer had, didn't include a 0 or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, is there a difference between someone doing that? And I mean, I understand that there's a connection between mistakes and vulnerabilities, but then there are also mistakes that are, simple human error that cause a vulnerability, like that one, that's something that can be resolved.
Yeah.
But then there are also vulnerabilities which, maybe the code is not incorrect. There's nothing actually incorrect about the code. It's just that it's weak and that it can be improved. And maybe that's where you come in. Do you have any thoughts on the difference between the two in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So blockchain technology is a new technology. So well, not that new, but it's a technology that we need to secure by when writing smart contracts and also before deploying smart contracts. So sometimes the mistakes is linked to the developer mistakes, or sometimes it's just a connection between two external calls between functions or smart contracts. And sometimes it's a problem, like you mentioned, with a 0, like just decimals. Sometimes it's mathematical operations. So the big picture here is it's very important to take auditing service or auditing smart contracts seriously, because you never know.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, let's focus on vulnerabilities for a second, and then after that, we'll talk about mistakes. Are there some, maybe common types of vulnerabilities that you've seen while you're doing your smart contract audits, but also that you're thinking about when you're writing your own smart contract code?
Absolutely. So one of the destructive attacks that smart contract audits can stop is a recurrency attack. So recurrency attacks are one of the earliest smart contract vulnerabilities. It was detected on Ethereum blockchain in I think 2016. So this attack occurred when the smart contract gets an external calls from another malicious smart contract to deposit and withdraw funds. And the mistakes that opens their vulnerabilities is that the developer, when writing smart contracts about specific functions, didn't update simply the balance of user before allowing external calls. So as a blockchain developer and that I work on security also, it's very, very important to always make sure that all variables inside the smart contract are updated before calling external smart contract, because these smart contracts can be malicious and can really damage the code and the logic of the smart contracts.
And so, in that kind of case where you have a vulnerability like that, I would imagine that some blockchain developers, when they're writing the smart contract code, they don't really see that as a mistake or an issue unless they're already familiar with what kind of exploits are taking place or have taken place in the past. Is that right? So do you, as a blockchain developer and a smart contract auditor, do you need to basically stay up to date with what kind of, do you need to know your history and,
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a really good question, because one of the thing that we should know as personally as or all blockchain auditors is we should stay up to date, and we should also learn from the hacks that happened in the past. We should also try to hack other smart contracts that happened in the past. We should not hacking in a bad way, but just like exercising how this hack happened, and we should avoid them while writing our smart contracts. So we always learn. We always make sure that the smart contract I personally write, so it's secure and it's not vulnerable to the past hacks.
And so your goal, when doing an audit, is to keep an eye out, to be thinking about previous exploits that you've seen or heard happen, and you want to help our client avoid those potential exploits.
Absolutely.
In the future. Now, are there some other common ones? I mean, I think there's one called like a honeypot or something like that. Tell us a little bit more about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have honeypots. We have oracle manipulations. We have front running, and the list absolutely is long. But we can maybe make another episode to talk about each attack in details, because they are technical. So we can absolutely have another episode talking about these attacks.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do that then in the future. So let me ask you this. I know that just thinking about what kind of clients come to us for smart contract auditing, there's a benefit to the blockchain-based startup where they want to have an audit because they want to ensure that their protocol is secure and not vulnerable to exploits, because obviously they want their users to keep coming back.
Yeah,
and it's not secure, they're not going to keep coming back. At the same time, there's a benefit to those users. The users want to see that the startup, that their smart contracts have been audited. And so, sometimes an audit report will show that a particular project is highly centralized and that there are some risks to the users because, the protocol, there's so much control in the developer's hands, where, they could potentially pull all of the liquidity, or they can do something that's not in the best interest of the users. And so, do users sometimes want to be aware of that risk, that they need to know that where they're putting their money, they're putting it in a place where it can be withdrawn or messed around with the centralized entity that's there.
Yeah, that's a good question. And also, it's like in real life, we can't create a bank account with the bank like that gets robbed every week or every day, so it's the same thing. But in cryptocurrency world, people are a little bit crazy about this, because it's about loving the technology and being part of the community. So even if they see attacks around the space for several Web3 projects, we see that $1 billion invested in protocols, even though we see attacks, because people, they want to be part of that technology. People, they love decentralization, because they feel that they are they own the network, they are part of the network, and so on. So yeah, to answer to your question, absolutely, like people or users, they would love to invest in protocols and NFT projects. There are the NFT projects that are secured, audited, and that they will not throw their money like over the window. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, users want to know that they can. I mean, there's an element of trust there, basically.
Exactly. The minimum. Yeah.
And so, and those people, maybe they'd prefer to be called passionate and not crazy. So let's call them passionate.
Okay.
About Web3.
Okay.
So let's jump then to mistakes. So I mentioned earlier, that an example maybe of a mistake in smart contract code, or at least from a recent exploit, was a missing zero. So, myself as a lawyer, if I'm writing up a contract or editing some kind of agreement, if I make a spelling mistake, maybe it looks bad on me, but in terms of practicality, in terms of what the contract does, doesn't make too much of a difference, really.
Yeah.
Now, smart contracts, that's code, and I don't write code. Does it make a difference if you make mistakes like typos and that kind of stuff in smart contracts that you're deploying?
Yeah, it does make the difference, because as we mentioned in the last episode, smart contracts, when smart contracts are deployed on the blockchain, they are immutable, which means that the code cannot be changed. So if we miss a zero, or we miss something, or we found the mistakes inside the code, that can lead to very, very bad vulnerabilities for other hackers to get their hand on it. And one of the examples that's, for example, mistakes that happen in the space, and it's mostly, not mostly, but I will say when we talk about DeFi, modern DeFi smart contracts, so they deal a lot with enormous amounts of money in tokens, or like ETH value, and a lot of operation in contract logics are connected to each others. So a simple error in this mathematical operation can lead to lost user funds. And one of I will give some examples of these mistakes. For example, incorrect calculation of output token amounts, incorrect decimals handling, like you mentioned before, about like missing a zero instead of 18 decimals, incorrect order of operation during fees calculation. If we talk about lending protocol, borrowing protocols, Uniswap, and so on. So we have also other errors. For example, incorrect work with ERC20 tokens implementations. So we all know OpenZipline implementation of the ERC 720 tokens. But sometimes people they want to modify these implementations. They like I will say they want to custom them, and sometimes such as a small change may lead to non-functional method of the contracts, and it could be a very tiny mistake, but that could be huge, and that could lead to stuck funds or sometimes exploits.
You call them tiny mistakes because you understand what you're looking at when you're reviewing these smart contracts. But if I were to review smart contracts, I wouldn't be able to identify those mistakes because I don't know what to look for, right? And so I think it's important to note that with a lot of these blockchain-based startups, the founding team, like the core team, is not the same person as the blockchain developer that's writing the smart contracts.
Absolutely.
So how could they know, or how could they be sure that their developer that's writing the smart contracts that might hold millions of dollars worth of user funds, how could they know if they made a mistake or not? And so, really they need, like when you're reviewing these smart contracts on their behalf, are you using like a fine-tooth comb where you're reading it, line by line, like you're being very careful, you're thinking as if you're in the mind of the writer, but you're a second pair of eyes doing that?
So most of projects that were hacked, they were even like sometimes most of them they were hacked because they were on the blockchain, they were deployed already on the blockchain. So in this case, it's sometimes too late to find the solution because the hacker drained all funds. That's why when smart contract auditing come into place, so before deploying the contracts and the project in your project into the blockchain, it's there when it's the time when you come to us and ask us to audit your smart contract. And the method that we follow, there are like different steps. So I will call the first step is specification. That's I call personally, where we read the project's documentation to understand the architecture, the code, the logic behind the protocol. And in this phase also, we talk about the team, the developer team, to discuss if we have any question about this, about the detail inside the code. The second phase is check. So we check the manually all the if the smart contracts it's not vulnerable to the past hacks that happened in the past. So and the third phase, it's automated tests. So in this phase, we run softwares that allow us to see vulnerabilities in the code and to correct them. And the last phase is to do it manually. So we always go from easy to hard. So when we review smart contracts manually, we go absolutely from line to line, and we check every single line, every single function, every single math operation. And if we have any question, we always need talk and need to work with other developer teams. And the last phase is reporting, where we deliver auditing report with all the findings that we found. Sometimes we don't find, but we also have best practice. We ask about you could do this instead of do that to reduce gas optimization. That's what we call gas optimization. So it's always beneficial to audit smart contract, not only for finding vulnerabilities, but also to respect best practice in based on the blockchain that you want to deploy your smart contract in.
Great. So it's not just about auditing and finding vulnerabilities, but it's also about identifying improvements that you can make to the code.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a process. It's a back and forth process between you
Yeah.
and the team and the development team. And then, ultimately you produce a report, an audit that, they can publish or they can do whatever. It's a stamp of approval, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, this kind of reminds me when it comes to mistakes in smart contracts, kind of reminds me of, me being back in school when I write an essay or some kind of report and, I finish it and I review it over and over and over. And sometimes, there'll be a mistake in there that I just don't see. Like no matter how many times I re-review it over and over, there's a mistake in there that you don't see. And I don't know if it has something to do with the human mind or what, but you just tend not to see your own mistakes. And so, in those cases, it's helpful to have a friend or someone else review it because they're a fresh, pair of eyes and they can identify, they see those mistakes better than you. And so is it kind of like that, when you're reviewing someone else's smart contracts or when you're writing your own smart contracts, you want to have someone else look at it because they might be able to see the mistake that you or they made that you couldn't see?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good and realistic example that you just talk about, because I will say it's the same in the blockchain world. That's why every single project has to audit their smart contract, because it's crucial. It's not just like writing a smart contract and deploy it on the on the blockchain. It's very, very important. And like you mentioned, a second pair of eyes will allow you to correct mistakes, to respect best practices, and to save users' funds from hackers.
Right. Yeah.
It's crucial. Yeah.
It's crucial. And so, lastly, Ouail, just to kind of send us off here, do you have any advice for projects that use smart contracts? We have their NFT collections, DeFi protocols, other blockchain-based projects. Any advice for them?
Yeah.
As they develop their code?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I would say it's very important to keep the code logic as simple as possible when writing your smart contract. Always testing and security audits are vital for every smart contract project. So have your smart contract audited, having a solid understanding of Ethereum virtual machine and Solidity best practice. Be attentive to blockchain properties, stay updated about the last hacks and vulnerabilities, and so this is, in my opinion, the advice that I will give to every developers who write smart contracts out there.
Great. Well, as always, thanks for all the really great information. For telling us a little bit about the difference between vulnerabilities and mistakes in smart contracts and the importance of smart contract audits. Thanks again for getting on. And
Thank you.
For everyone that's watching, stay tuned for our next episode of Blockchain Security with Rose Law Group. Thanks and take care.
Thank you. Take care.